Good evening. I'm Nima and this is Forum Daily for Wednesday, July 20th. We begin our cast with a new report by Statistics Canada that finds after a record-breaking month in May, inflation hit another high last month. The year-over-year inflation rate rose 8.1% in June, boosted by soaring gas prices. Now that's up from 7.7% in May, and it marked the largest yearly change since January of 1983. Canadians also continue to see higher food prices on their grocery bills, with the cost of food up 8.8%. Well, it looks like the U.S. wants to make a lumber deal with Canada. Two U.S. lawmakers are urging the Biden administration's trade ambassador to pursue a new softwood deal. This for long-term relief in a market where about 30% of the timber used in the United States comes from Canada. But the U.S. wants Canada to address the federal fee regime. Ottawa sets the stumpage fees for lumber harvested from provincial and federal land. And producers in the U.S. who are forced to pay market rates claim it amounts to an unfair subsidy. Canada's Chief Public Health Officer calls the random COVID-19 testing at major airports an early warning system for new variants as travelers enter Canada. But infectious disease experts are at odds over the value of the mandatory testing. Physician Dr. Zain Chagla says there are less bothersome ways to watch for variants, such as testing the wastewater at the airport. The federal government relaunched its testing program yesterday at airports in Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, and Montreal. This comes after pausing the random testing in June to help ease long customs delays. All right, well, meanwhile, WestJet workers at the Calgary and Vancouver airports have voted in support of a strike if their union cannot reach a deal with the airline. Unifor says more than 700 employees could walk off the job as early as next Wednesday, July 27th. A spokesman for the union says wages are the key issue in talks over the group's first collective agreement with the carrier. The union is also highlighting what it calls a pressure cooker atmosphere. It says workers have endured verbal abuse and physical threats from travelers whose flights were delayed or canceled by the carrier. All right, turning to a new report by real estate market research firm Urbanation, which says rents in the Greater Toronto Area are rising fast. This is echoing the latest numbers from online rental platforms about other major Canadian cities. The report says that dropping vacancy rates in Toronto have pushed up the average rent to more than $2,500 a month. Other Canadian cities are seeing a similar story. The report for June from rentals.ca found that average rents in Canada were up 9.5% from the previous year, while Vancouver had a 24.7% jump from the last year, and Calgary saw a 26.1% increase. On the East Coast, Newfoundland and Labrador's health minister will meet with Ukrainian doctors in the province who have fled Russian attacks on their country. Some of the doctors say they arrived in the province ready to become licensed to practice, but they have been met with silence from the provincial government. There are Ukrainian physicians in St. John's who say they've spoken with Nova Scotia officials, offering to help them relocate to that province. Moving to Alberta now, where those over the age of 18 are able to book their fourth dose of the COVID-19 vaccine as of today. Alberta Health says adults can start booking their second booster. This only if it has been 5 months since their first booster. The agency says the expanded availability will give residents more choices to protect themselves against COVID-19. In Quebec, a representative for the northern part of the province in the Provincial Association of Defense Lawyers warns of dire consequences due to delays of hearings. Sarah Plamondon is decrying the cancellation of an entire week of hearings due to a lack of judges in Nunavik. She says the consequences are dire for both the accused facing delays and victims who might start to lose trust in the judicial system. She says some cases could be pushed back past the limit, which was set in the Supreme Court's Jordan ruling, and could result in charges being dropped. On the West Coast, a report going before a Vancouver Council committee today raises concerns over the bid for the Indigenous-led 2030 Winter Olympic Games. The report by the city manager says council would need a clear understanding of the proposed operating and financial costs to the city. It says the bid for the Games needs to be submitted to the International Olympic Committee by early next year, and that isn't enough time to negotiate key terms and conditions. But the Canadian Olympic Committee says there is plenty of time for a cost-benefit analysis of the project. We'll be right back with a look at how to stay cool amid rising temperatures. Forum Daily's weekly medical segment is up next, so stay tuned. We'll be right back shortly after a break. Heat wave warnings can be seen across much of the country this week as temperatures hit extreme highs. For a large part of Ontario, heat warnings are stretching into day 2. Temperatures are expected to reach or surpass 30 degrees Celsius and hit the upper 30s with humidity. Effects can be felt from Sudbury to Ottawa and southwest to Windsor. Environment Canada says Barrie, London, and Parry Sound are also under severe thunderstorm watches. The agency says some parts of southern Ontario could see the heat linger for another 4 days. However, many areas will see some relief by tomorrow. So how can you stay safe and cool amid these rising temperatures? Well, joining us now in our weekly medical segment is Dr. Abhishek Raut, Medical Director at Appletree Medical Group. Dr. Raut, welcome back.
Great to be here.
So let's start with this, Dr. Raut. How do these extremely high temperatures impact the human body?
Well, our bodies are just not meant to withstand high temperatures. As the heat outside goes up, it forces our core temperatures to increase as well. If that core temperature actually goes past 40, we start seeing organs shutting down and cells deteriorating. There's a lot of consequences to that, of course. We have preliminary research that shows that in southwestern Ontario in particular, we see a 22% increase in emergency department visits during these heat seasons, according to data analyzed from 2002 all the way to 2019. So quite a severity that occurs with heat.
Some very concerning information there, Doctor. Now, there's also the issue of humidity. So what are the concerns around a mixture of high heat and humidity?
Right. So when our surroundings go high in terms of heat, our body does what it should do, which is start sweating. That's an evaporative cooling mechanism. So our capillaries are going to sweat, and that's going to help bring down the temperature. Now, if it's really humid, that's actually not possible. Sweating becomes far less effective because the air is already saturated with moisture. So high humidity means little to no sweat evaporation, which means now we can't use sweat to cool the body and the blood doesn't cool down. And as a result, we are now looking at things like heat exhaustion and heat stroke.
And in many cases, the summer heat can affect your body without you even realizing it. So what are some of the telltale signs of heat exhaustion or even heat stroke?
So heat exhaustion really occurs when you have experienced an extensive loss of water or salt due to sweating. People will start feeling very lightheaded. They might have a bit of a headache. They feel tired and weak. They may feel quite nauseated as well, and they could even pass out or faint. Most of the time that isn't the case, however, but with heat stroke, what happens is the cooling mechanism completely fails. So you can't sweat and the internal temperature goes up. So what you're seeing in a heat stroke situation is confusion, hallucinations, rapid breathing, and loss of consciousness.
All right, Doctor, let's talk about solutions. So what kind of steps can we take to treat heat exhaustion in particular?
So what we're seeing with heat exhaustion is the body temperature is increasing. We're seeing that excessive sweating. What we know is that for heat exhaustion, the best thing to do is make sure that we're in the shade, resting, and providing some kind of electrolyte replacement, mostly water and electrolytes, that could quickly veer out of that dangerous territory. Cold packs, washing the head, face, and neck with cold water, and frequently sipping cool water also brings down that body temperature.
And what about the more extreme heat stroke? What can you do to help someone who may be suffering from this?
So heat stroke is very concerning. So without proper attention, heat stroke can definitely become life-altering or even life-threatening. So the first thing you would want to do is certainly call 911 when you see a person in heat stroke. You want to move them to a cool, shady area, remove any unnecessary clothing, wet the person's skin, and fan the person. That's going to help decrease the temperature very quickly. If you have availability, apply ice packs to the neck, groin, and armpits and back, or even immerse the person in a cool tub of water while you're waiting for emergency services.
All right, and we're often told to stay hydrated when out in the sun, but just how important is hydration during these times?
We know hydration can be quite important there. Drinking water before any form of work makes it easier to stay hydrated there. Water, by the way, will almost always maintain hydration during work. As long as you're having regular meals, that'll replace the salt lost in sweat. But if you're going to be outside for several hours, then sports drinks are quite helpful as well because they provide the water and the electrolytes and salts that are lost in sweat.
All right, Dr. Raut, thank you for another informative segment on Forum Daily. We'll see you next week.
Thanks so much.
Stay with us. Coming up after the break, we're turning to the popular social media app TikTok and a new report which finds the app might have access to a troubling amount of information on your phone. We'll be speaking to Dr. Michael Lammbrau, Managing Director at the Internet 2.0 organization in the United States. He'll join us to discuss these findings, along with the revelation that over a third of IP addresses linked to TikTok are also linked to China. And of course, we'll have more news from around the world when we return on Forum Daily, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. An internet security company's research into the popular social media app TikTok finds the application can collect far more information than you think on your phones. Internet 2.0 indicates the app may have access to anything from your SIM number and hard drive to the accounts on your device. What's more is that over a third of the IP addresses linked to TikTok were found to have links to mainland China. Well, joining us now to tell us more about this analysis of TikTok is Dr. Michael Lammbrau, Managing Director at Internet 2.0 USA. Dr. Lammbrau, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with a brief overview of this analysis into TikTok by Internet 2.0.
Yeah, sure. So our analysts, they do cybersecurity. They reverse engineer applications. They do all sorts of security related research, and we took a look at the TikTok app because of the recent, the flourish of news related to the TikTok application. And we were able to show that we've done previous research on this app, but we've been able to show that TikTok application is not only collecting data on your device, but it's also collecting data that is, so what from the average user in the, United States or Canada and Australia, but also they've been telling regulatory agencies that this data is not accessible from mainland China, which we've proven that it is able to be accessed by mainland China and is being accessed by mainland China. So they're collecting all the information, your location, the calendar, external storage, what Wi-Fi you're connecting to, your MAC address. And so all of this data is being harvested by the TikTok app, and it is quite concerning from from a US standpoint and from an Australian standpoint, and I'm sure from a Canadian standpoint as well.
Definitely some concerning information, Doctor. Now, so does TikTok inform its users of such privacy access, maybe through cookies acceptance or disclaimers?
Yes, they oftentimes, and in the case of TikTok, they will relentlessly ask for user access. And as we know, users do not actually read these terms of services. Most often, they just sort of click the yes to use the app. But in the case of Facebook or Twitter or other applications, LinkedIn, this is not as concerning as if it's coming from a state that is actually adversarial towards Australia, the US, or Canada. And this data is being harvested and used by a totalitarian state in China. And so this is what is most concerning. It's not that this data, for the most part, these applications like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, they're answerable to democratic institutions. So we can take these cases to regulatory agencies within democratic institutions. The problem here is it's offshore, it's in China, and it's able to be accessed by the Chinese government.
And what's interesting is that over a third of the IP addresses linked to TikTok were connected to mainland China. So what exactly does this mean in terms of the scale and magnitude of this access?
Well, it just means, and I think they've gone ahead and they're quite concerned about it from a PR standpoint. They've fired their head of security. They're in full backpedaling mode. They're trying to, block the information as it comes out or dismiss it as it comes out. But for the most part, everything they've said up front is that the data is hosted in the US for US users, and it's not accessible by mainland China. And this, our research and other research has shown that it is accessible. So this is not only a violation of law, but it's actually they're doing a large part to deceive regulatory agencies in this sense.
And are there any differences between macOS and iOS devices in terms of this security and access?
Well, from our research, we've done both for the macOS, or not for the macOS, but for the the iPhone and for Android systems, and it's the same. Yeah, correct.
And why would the Chinese government be interested in such information in the first place?
Well, this is collecting of the information, hosting the information, storing the information somewhere is it's problematic because that information can always be sourced if needed. So if they're interested in a certain person or individual or a network of folks, they can go ahead and look into that later on in the future. But from also a democratic standpoint, applications like TikTok are easily manipulated by the folks behind the scenes, let's say in mainland China, who could easily amplify. They can pick divisive narratives within your culture or society, and they can push them. So this can lead to election interference. This can lead to all sorts of troublesome, what would you say, misbehavior within the social media ecosystem.
All right, Dr. Lammbrau, we've got a quick 20 seconds left here, but where can our viewers go to learn more about your research into this?
They can go to internet2-0.com. You can download the app, or you can download our white papers and this white paper from the website. You can also visit us on LinkedIn or Facebook. We also have pages there. So thank you very much for your time, Nima.
Thank you, sir. We'll be right back after a short break on Forum Daily News. The head office of the European Union is proposing that member states cut their gas use by 15% over the coming months. This to blunt the impact of any Russian cutoff of natural gas supplies. While the initial cuts would be voluntary, the EU Commission is also asking for the power to impose mandatory reductions in the event of an emergency. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says Russia is blackmailing Europe, and she accuses President Vladimir Putin of weaponizing gas exports. EU member states will discuss the measures at an emergency meeting of energy ministers next Tuesday. Moving to Sri Lanka now, where the Prime Minister has been elected as president. The votes were by lawmakers who opted for a seasoned veteran leader to lead the country out of economic collapse. Ranil Wickremesinghe is an ally of the ousted president who fled the country and resigned after protests. The new leader on Wednesday urged fellow lawmakers to unite in saving the nation. But he is a divisive figure and unpopular among a public fed up with shortages of food, fuel, and medicine. He has already served 6 terms as prime minister and as finance minister. And he has been leading negotiations on a bailout package with the International Monetary Fund. Last week, he declared a state of emergency after protesters stormed the presidential palace and his office. All right, well, in the United Kingdom, the Conservative Party has chosen the 2 finalists in the contest to replace Boris Johnson as Prime Minister and party leader. The race includes Rishi Sunak, the former Treasury chief who steered the UK's economy through the pandemic. He's up against Liz Truss, who has led the UK's response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine as Foreign Secretary. The winner will be announced on September 5th. Turning to a new UN report which says at least 700 people have been killed and 1,400 wounded in Afghanistan since the Taliban took over last year. The majority of those casualties were linked to attacks by the Islamic State group's affiliate in the country, which is a rival of the Taliban. The UN also highlighted the poor situation of women and girls since the takeover, and it recorded 160 extrajudicial killings and 178 arrests of former government and military officials. A Taliban spokesman has called the report baseless and propaganda and its findings untrue. All right, well, meanwhile, Iraqi Kurdish officials say 8 tourists have been killed. This comes after Turkish airstrikes struck a resort area in northern Iraq. All casualties were Iraqis, and over 20 people were wounded. Turkey regularly carries out airstrikes into the northern region, and it has sent commandos to support its offensives, which are targeting elements of the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party. Officials say this is the first time the tourists have been killed in the frequent attacks. In Libya, the National Oil Corporation says it resumed oil exports, ending a months-long hiatus. The resumption of oil exports has come after one of the country's rival governments fired the chairman of the state-run oil corporation. Libya's prized light crude has long been a feature of Libya's conflict with rival militias and foreign powers who are interested in controlling Africa's largest oil reserves. To the east, Hong Kong's annual book fair has kicked off, with several publishers of political books prevented from taking part. Others say they had to be cautious about what they exhibited. The fair's main organizer says it did not screen the books for sale at the fair, but they stressed that exhibitors must abide by the law. Hong Kong authorities have tightened controls on freedom of expression. This comes after a tough national security law took effect 2 years ago. Netflix lost another 970,000 subscribers during the spring. This comes amid tougher competition and soaring inflation, which is squeezing household budgets. And it's increasing the urgency behind the video streaming service's effort to launch a cheaper option with commercial interruptions. Shell-shocked family pets began roaming around Ukraine's capital with nowhere to go in the opening stages of Russia's war. Volunteers opened a shelter to take them in and tried to find them new homes, or at least some human companionship. Every day, Kyiv residents come to visit cats and dogs evacuated from cities on the front lines or left without owners because of the nearly 5-month war. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you can always visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, and make sure to follow our social media handles on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also watch all of our commentary, programming, and interviews on the News Forum YouTube channel. All right, thanks for joining us on Forum Daily News, and we'll see you next time. Take care, Canada.